All right. I got Eric Snider of Unity Property in Pest. What city and state are you out of?
Akron, Ohio.
Akron. Okay. I remember going to Akron a couple times. I used to be a salesman on the road all through mostly central Ohio, Columbus.
Okay.
And then outlying about an hour away from Columbus. I used to travel all that area, plus Chicago.
Okay.
So I'm a bit familiar. I sold a lot of siding and windows and decks for a Sears contractor back in the early 90s. So I'm a little bit familiar with your construction in the area and stuff. So hopefully I'm not as ignorant as I look. But no, man, I wanted to have a conversation for three purposes. One is for home inspectors who have to deal with the pest control part, but don't have the pest control licensing or training. And then for the pest control guys that having to deal with home inspectors, and the rifts that happen and the tension on this because of either misidentification or things that are missed that should have been disclosed or not disclosed, and all that tension, because we're dealing with the homeowner, we're dealing with real estate agents, we're dealing with the home inspector a lot of times, and then we have the laws of both, and the homeowner is like, I don't know what's, they're especially if you're a first-time homeowner, nothing. If you've never been through this process, nothing. And then everything is usually after the fact. If I would have known, I would have not bought this house. And I get a lot of that from homeowners, that my customers who went from living with their parents to buying their house for the first time. They say, Frank, you've been taking care of my parents' home for, can you come over and look and do pest control? We're getting started. And all of a sudden I start, oh, there's drywood termite here. Did you get a home inspection? No. Did you get, a termite inspection? No. So I think we want to deal with both parts. Let's talk about you and your company and what you guys do, because you have experience on both parts. So tell me about your experience and about your company and what you guys do.
So back in 2020, I actually launched Unity Property and Pest to really combine the two services, because I started out 10 years ago in pest control. Did that for several years, and as a result, I was the guy that was going out and doing all the WDI inspections for my company. So home inspectors would hire us out, and I started meeting and becoming good friends with all these home inspectors in the area, and I was the one doing their termite inspections. Mm-hmm. Became really close with one, good friends with one, and ended up jumping ship with him, and went to school, worked with him side by side, and learned the trade, and then started doing home inspections for almost 5 years. Okay. And just back in 2020, I kind of hit a ceiling with him to where there was no more opportunity for growth. Right. So I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to go out on my own for both. So on the home inspection side, we do light commercial, we do residential home inspections, we do radon testing, we do sewer scope inspections. We do mold and mold sampling. And for the pest control side, we do everything except wildlife.
Okay.
So
right. So for a lot of people listening across different states, the laws are different in every state. They're not the same for everything. And so we're sticking pretty much to the Ohio laws in this case that govern, your industry, because like you mentioned, you have WDI. Here in Florida, it's WDO, because wood decay fungi is part of a wood destroying organism. Yep. And in some cases, I was just having a conversation with a guy in Jersey. He says, no, that falls under mold, and they classify it as a mold. And, it's technically not a mold. It's a fungi. That's a big definition. And sure. It's legalities of how you report it, because then we got lawyers all over the place looking for who we can sue. As a matter of fact, there's probably a website somewhere, that whowecansue.com, and try to find somebody. And so we're in the middle of all this, trying to make sure that the homeowner that's buying the home knows what he's getting into, hopefully. And then the person selling the home sometimes isn't so cooperative with us.
Yeah.
So talk to me about what exactly constitutes a home inspection, and how many different components are there in your state to what classifies as a real home inspection?
I don't know if there's, I thinking of that word, like what classifies it by state, but typically it's somebody that is trying to buy or invest in some form of a property, whether they're trying to list it for sale. So sometimes they do pre-listing inspections, allows them to get ahead of some of the repairs and construction costs that's going to come with the general home inspection from a buyer. Or just somebody that's trying to purchase a property. And what we come in and we look at all the major components, basically from the rooftop down to the foundation. So
Right.
that includes all major systems.
Right. Explain that, because I mean, if we got a homeowner who has
Sure.
no clue what major systems are, you know,
Sure.
and all that. So yeah, let's just break it down, like, you know, pretty simply as far as we can go, of what
So
that
we'd
means.
we'd inspect the roof. I try my best to get on every single roof, weather and safety permitting.
Right.
Some are just not feasible, but I have, the means to, at least get my ladder up to the top there, or view it with binoculars from the ground, poles, whatever the case may be. But we do a thorough roof inspection, chimney components. Once we get into the attic, we're checking insulation levels, we're checking framing, we're checking roof sheathing, looking for possible leaks as signs of possible biological growth or mold, whatever the case may be. And then we go top down. So we're running all major systems. We're running water, we're checking pressure, we're checking for volume loss, we're checking for leaks, we're checking for, all electrical major systems, including like HVAC, AC, heating, the electric panel. They have some pumps in the area, we're checking all plumbing. So all major components. And then of course, your foundation, which would be like your structural,
Right.
beams, columns, support columns, and such.
Got it. So this is pretty much, and here in Florida, and from what I understand about WDI and WDO, is that this is in a lot of cases, as far as the structure goes, it's what's visible, what's seen. A lot of people would say, how come this wall was so damaged on the inside, and we had to tear down and we had to tear out this whole area, and nobody told us that this was it. You can't see behind walls.
Yep.
And a lot of the cases, you can't touch a lot of things. Yeah, so because if you have a
Can't tear
homeowner,
stuff apart.
you can't, I mean, even here we're visually inspecting. Like a lot of people will use like a stick with a ball on it to tap on baseboards to check if you have termites and if you hear different sounds. Well, in a lot of cases, you don't even want to do that, because all of a sudden you hit it, it caves in, and the guy that's selling the home says, hey, now you have to replace all of my baseboards because that damage wasn't there. That's going to devalue my house. So there's a lot of limitations of homeowners that they need to understand, that when we're doing a lot of this, it is visual. Of course, if you're testing for pressure and temperature, and you're checking the water heater temperature coming out, and you're testing the air, that it's coming out at the right temperature, so everything is working how it should be working when you're doing this. And what else because you check for mold and radon, is that part of a normal home inspection, or is this something that somebody wants to add on, or how does that come into play?
It's typically an add-on service. And then, so when people call to schedule with a home inspection, I just do my due diligence, whether they want to or not, is completely up to them, but I do offer all those services. Right. And then they'll either tell me like, yes, and they'll ask me like, what's radon, or like, what's involved with the sewer scope inspection. And I walk them through the benefits of doing so. Right. But still, it just depends on them. And then I do have sections of my report, in my home inspection report, that does state that I offered and the client declined.
Got it. And let me ask you this, as far as some real estate transactions, especially with banking.
Yeah.
Certain banks will require a certain inspection. Like I know with like VA loans, it's different.
Yeah. VA, it's mandatory to have a termite inspection that's paid by the seller.
Paid by the seller. Got it.
Mhm.
Yeah, not the buyer. So it has to be done whether they want to or not. Let's talk about a termite inspection, because you have what in your area? You have subterranean termite. Got it. So what would constitute a termite inspection for the client? What are you actually looking for? And what's like the process that you're going through when you're inspecting for termite? What does that look like for the client?
So when I do it, I guess it's a little bit different. And when I say different, it shouldn't be different, but I know there's a lot of other inspectors in my area and people that offer that service that don't do it like I do it.
Right.
And then as in depth as I do it. So I do move insulation. You know what I mean? I do get my ladder down into the basement. I do get up there and I actually remove all that insulation so I can see everything up there. It's
Right.
not just a visual. If something is sealed while I'm there, I get permission from the seller to open. So sometimes, a lot of times in my area, the attic accesses are sealed. They're painted up. They're sealed tight.
Mm.
And I get permission so I can score that. And if they don't give me permission, I stay there until they're able to get somebody out there to score that for me.
Got it.
And make access for me. So mine are just a little bit more in depth. You know what I mean? Once I get up into the attic too, I move some of that insulation around. Obviously I don't go swimming through the stuff. There's just, it doesn't make any sense to do it, but, mine just take a little bit longer. They're just a little bit more in depth. It's not just visual for me. I do sounding. I have, different equipment that I'm able to use, like my thermal imaging. I use moisture meters, it just paints a little bit different of a picture,
Right. You're trying to define if there's more hidden stuff that can't be seen. Like,
Exactly.
what is it? Termatrack, for trying to get a visual, an audio sonar.
Yeah.
A lot of guys are using that. I know the thermal imaging is great, to try to discover if there's cartons in that wall.
Yeah.
A lot of times you can see it. It's always interpreting what's there that's difficult, because again, we have this, thermal camera, but it tells us there's something there. We just don't know what it is. If we want to know, we have to open it up, because we have no way of knowing. A lot of people say, well, there's thermal imaging. Let me ask you a question, because now we're getting into a little bit of the whole legality of using thermal and not using thermal in your state. Because here in Florida, it's always a double-edged sword. If you use a tool to try to determine something, if it's bad and you didn't find it, the lawyers get involved later and saying, well, if you discovered, why didn't you discover this over here that was not, because you didn't scan the whole house. So we get into this, people that don't like to use it, because then it opens them up in the possibility of litigation to, like, well, if you discovered this, why didn't you discover that?
Well, it all boils down to like your documentation,
right?
You know what I mean? And what you're inspecting. So like, hey, inspected this area in the lower section of the master bedroom, whatever, it's the only area that was detected and inspected.
Right. So the documentation, this is where a lot of guys fall apart. And I'm doing this for the benefit of the pest control guy who I've gone in for clients. And then I said, oh, wait a minute. He didn't see this whole wall, and they weren't going to treat it.
Well, okay.
During the treatment part, I went in and I said, I looked at it, and I found in an inner closet of the inner of the part of the structure, an actual carton with they were protruding through the drywall. The original inspector never saw it. They were just going to trench and treat on the outside, and that was it. They weren't going to treat interior walls anywhere. So thorough inspection here in Florida, unfortunately, it's not always thorough. The guy was there like 15 minutes and wrote up a contract. He was being a salesman. He's like, they're not interested in buying. I'm not going to put in a whole lot of time, because it wasn't a WDO. There's a difference between a WDO and a WDI, and then it's just a termite inspection, which is not documented. Unless you sign a contract and then you bought it. Because once you sign that contract, you own the problem. Explain the difference between, in your state or in your area, the difference between a termite inspection and a WDI.
Well, WDI comes with, obviously in my state, the NPA 33 report. You
Right.
know what I mean? That is sent over to them. So mine, like I said, I just go a little bit more in detail, especially my lower section of the comments there on what I put on there. That's not always favored on some of the real estate side and everything else like that. But at the end of the day, like those same realtors, they want me inspecting their house for pests.
Right.
You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, it's just like I'm there for my client. I always just got to remember that no matter what. I'm not there to like just make everybody happy on a situation. I'm just there to do my job, what you
Right.
paid me to do.
Right.
Now, what you're referring to also is like a termite inspection. We just call it like a pest inspection, right? Like, hey, I found bugs in my closet, you know, so we're just going out there for just a routine pest inspection. And that includes like a multitude of things like, hey, I found, you know, a large number of spiders throughout the crawl space. You got rodent droppings here. You got rodent access points. I'm finding termite wings in the crawl space, you know, whatever the case may be. And then I can just walk them through those situations on different treatment methods. And from there, they can either decide to like sign up with us and do treatment, or, you know, kind of sit on that information for a few days and make their own decision, you know, that doesn't actually come with the report. So the difference, I guess, would be the level of what I'm looking at in the report.
Right. And also the legality of it, because one is required that you file a report.
Sure.
The other one, I can send you a report, but it's not a legal requirement.
Exactly.
It's more of for your information.
Yep.
And
exactly.
then so when you're coming in as a home inspector, I'm a troubleshooter by nature. So I can't ignore things that I see.
Sure.
And from an integrity part on behalf of the client, not say something. In a lot of cases, in WDI reports and in certain forms, there is a place for you to put additional pests found that are not related. Some people keep it off. Some people put it on. Some people will send it to the real estate agent on a separate memo. You know, they'll sit with the homeowner and say, listen, you know, once you buy the house, here's what it's going to cost for us to fix this problem for you. And again, that becomes a problem, because you're like, if I was the homeowner, man, I want to know all this.
Sure.
Even if I am still going to buy this house, no matter what.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the times, like here in Florida, if you're buying a home and you're going to get picky about every little thing, you're not going to buy a home. It's not going to happen, because right now it's 450,000 minimum for a 1,700 square foot home that's 70 years old. It's going to have a ton of problems. I just bought this townhouse. This thing is 14 years old. They had converted the garage. This is the problem. They converted the garage. There was a roof leak that was right at the edge of the garage, coming down the structure of the wall, but coming out the garage door, because we had a foot gap between the garage door and the wall that they put up. Could not be seen. There was no mold. There was no staining. There was no indication. And I decided I need to take down this garage and convert it back to a garage. They had made it into a room for them to live in. I took down the wall, and immediately there's mold everywhere. And now I also have, so I decided, okay, let me open this up, see what's in there. Why do I have mold? Obviously there's water. I had noticed bubbling in my block outside of the paint. I said, there has to be water leaking through here somewhere. So that was between converting the garage, removing it, putting the garage door back, and fixing the roof leak, almost $4,000.
Oh, yeah.
And guess what? Since it was all a visual inspection, you know, I should have questioned that leak in the block. But if I would have done that, and I noticed it, and I said, there's water here somewhere, because this shouldn't be bubbling. But I've been looking for 3 months for a home. I had lost about 12 for 15 deals. This one was right up my alley, where it was in a great location. It was already, you know, I don't have to do anything to it. I could put my commercial vehicles here, which is another problem. And I had enough room in my garage to convert it and have a small little place to put all my tools and stuff. And the fact that I had lost 13 deals because everybody wanted anywhere between 15 to 25,000 above the appraised value in cash at closing.
Yeah.
I needed 80 grand just to close on anything on 400,000 because the banker's saying, now we're not loaning on this loan a 5%. It's going to be 10 because it's overvalued. So
Isn't that crazy?
So the homeowner is frustrated. The homeowner is like, I had to move because there was no place to rent in Miami. I mean, rents are a 2-bedroom apartment is $1,800 to $2,400 a month. So it was cheaper for me to buy and then say, and then you're going to be most homeowners, whether they realize it or not, they're going to be house poor right now for years.
Yeah.
Because chances are, if it happened to me, like it happened in 2007 and then 2009 came and both of my properties were underwater. I mean, they were basically, overvalued at that time because I had bought at the top of the market back then too. So they're going to be cash poor because they just, $48,000, $50,000 on a closing on a home. Then you're like, how the hell do we have the money to repair this afterwards if we don't see it? And then all of a sudden there's a wall and it's $20,000 to do the repairs, $30,000 because nobody caught it. That's the frustration that the homeowner doesn't understand, that you're only limited to certain things and you're not going to see everything. And they're like, but I had a home inspection done. How come they didn't tell me I had termite when it was visible? The evidence was there. You're looking at the baseboard and the droppings are there. But the inspector didn't say anything. He didn't recommend a termite inspection. It's up to the homeowner to know what they need because the realtor is not going to recommend a termite inspection. Yeah. And that's the problem that we're having.
Some of them will. Some of the good ones will.
Here, I've bought 3 properties. Nobody ever recommended a termite inspection.
Yeah, I got some really great realtors I work with up in this area here that always recommend, across the board inspections.
And if you tell me, but I mean, like I said, I know enough. I've been in home improvements my whole life. I know what I'm looking at. And I said, if I start making a big fuss about this, my insurance company, after I bought the home, they dropped me.
Wow.
Because that garage was illegally converted.
Wow. Okay.
So, but if I wanted a place to live and I wanted to make the deal happen, that's part of what I had to eat, and I knew it.
Yeah.
So now it was another, they rewrote another policy, but at $1,000 more a year. So the, people would have been plus, we miscalculated the taxes on the escrow and this and that. We need another 500. So when you're moving into all this and you're like, oh my God, it's like, what was that movie? The one with the house was, it was a comedy about the house they bought, and no matter what they did, it was just like everything.
Yeah, with Tom Hanks, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, Money Pit, and that's what some people feel like. They get frustrated. The homeowners get frustrated. So I think the only thing we can actually do is educate them. Hey, you really need to get, and a company like yours. The reason I would rather do business with a company like yours is because you're not going to be biased.
Yeah.
You're going to say, I do the home inspection. I do the mold inspection. I do the termite inspection. I do the pest inspection. And I'm going to give you everything versus having to hire 2 and 3 companies to do one thing. Let's get into the issue of, and you look at it both from a pest control guy side, and then look at it from the home inspector side, because you got to do both. Yeah. And the home inspector comes in and does a home inspection, but he's not a pest control guy. And he says, oh, you have rat droppings in your attic. And he tells the homeowner he's got rat droppings. The only problem was it wasn't rat droppings. It was bat guano. And now, should they, what would you do in the case that you're not doing a termite inspection, you're not doing a pest inspection, you're just doing a home inspection, but you find all these other issues because you're going to see it whether you're,
Yeah.
I mean, you're crawling up in that attic and you see that termite tube.
Yeah.
You're not doing a termite inspection, but you can't unsee it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, you can't
So,
unsee what you find in that home. What is the process that you would go through?
So, well, the first thing is with my home inspection report, I have a whole section for pest, and it's just a disclaimer letting them know that I am not here for a termite inspection or a pest inspection. I'm here for a home inspection. So it basically separates me from that from the get-go,
Right.
because they didn't want me there for that, but I am there for that. And I do report what I see. And then I just walk them through it like, hey, up there, I'm seeing some mice activity. It's pretty common, especially in this area with this age of house. It's been empty for this long. There's some things that you can go through, and I walk them through, and it's just educating them. Just walk them through, and they're like, oh, you know what, mice activity is not that big of a deal. But if I see back guano and stuff like that, I'm like, yeah, I'm seeing quite a bit of back guano up in the attic, and there's quite a bit of entry points around the exterior here. You're gonna, eventually you're gonna look at possibly hiring out a wildlife expert. You know what I mean, to do some exclusion work and everything else like that. And then they ask me for prices on something like that. I don't do wildlife. But I do have at least a ballpark on like minimum on what it's going to run. And I'm like, you're looking at, upwards of a few $1,000s, and just educate them on that. When you were talking about with doing home inspections, a lot of people in this market have not been doing them, either waiving or doing after the fact. But the thing is a lot of these people have the opportunity, even if they're buying a house as is, meaning it's already being sold as nothing can be fixed. They're just buying it as it is. It still gives them the opportunity doing a home inspection to get ahead of that. Like, hey, you have a ton more going on here than you think you have going on here. It gives them the ability to walk away from a situation instead of like just purchasing it and then hiring us out after the fact when they already own it, man.
Right.
And I see that all the time. I see that all the time.
Yeah, no, I am one of those advocates of direct to consumer information and going direct to consumer when I'm advertising a lot of my business, because in the past we did depend on other people to feed us the business.
Yeah.
But then it became contentious when I had to inform them that the reason they're having this problem is because of their practice. In other words, we used to do, I do a lot of lawn care, and we used to get a ton of business from landscapers. But the reason they were having so many problems is because of the malpractice of the landscaper. It got very contentious for us. I decided at one point I didn't want that anymore. So we went direct to consumer, and we educate our customers now on, they always ask us, can you tell this information to my landscaper? And I say, no, because that's his job to know how he's supposed to do his job.
Yep.
It's my job. Here is the recommendations from the University of Florida on how to take care of that lawn. I'll send it to you. You can send it to them, have the discussion. It becomes a lot of the time contentious, and we hear the comments all the time in all the pest control groups. They keep misidentifying stuff. They told the customer this, they told the customer that. And if you try to, again, in your case, and I'll make a point again, you report what you see. Yeah. A lot of people don't have that in their reporting. They won't report it because, again, they're not pest control expert. I got to respect the inspector who tells the client, I would rather you tell the client, listen, I suspect you may have a pest issue.
Yep.
I can't identify it. I'm not a pest expert.
Yep.
I'm just letting you know I recommend you hire a pest control company.
Yep.
And at least because you see enough houses, you've been there, especially when you've done, and there's a lot of new inspectors that just got trained academically with very little actual experience. And they start making all these identifications of things. Sure. And I would say, tell the client, hey, I recommend you call so-and-so on this. And then like I said, the relationships, I've seen it personally. The inspector, the real estate agent does not want an unfavorable report because it's going to tank his deal.
Yeah.
but that's why I am more of a direct to consumer guy, where I said I am not beholden to the inspector on a WDI. I'm not beholden to the homeowner that's selling it. In this case, I'm the end consumer to me that says, dang, I wish I would have known, because we're not going to have the money to fix any of this. You know,
Yeah.
and what is, you know, that's my, I feel like ultimately always, and that's gotten me in trouble at companies I work for, where they actually think I work for them. No, I work for your customer.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie to the customer to make the deal happen. I won't do that. And that's always gotten me in trouble. So once I go in and I say, I suspect, but again, that's not my area of expertise, I would highly recommend it. And I would at least put that in my report. And then sometimes that's favorable and unfavorable.
Yeah. Well, and that's always going to happen no matter what. I mean, it doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, like, my client, the buyer, seller, whoever it is, hired me. So I work for them no matter what. I'm not here to make everybody else happy. I'm here to do my job and report it as such.
Yeah.
Because, you know, 9 times out of 10, you walk, like some of those situations you were talking about, you walk into a situation and be like, hey, your floor's falling in. You know what I mean? Like, the buyer has the absolute right to know, you know?
Right.
Especially before they pull the trigger on something like that and realize they don't have the money to pay for it because they've already overpaid for a property that they really, that's, you know, they've already overpaid for something that's not worth what it is, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the case right now. Everything is, I walked into some properties that were like Zillow bottom out.
Yeah.
And they artificially inflated the price on that property in the neighborhood by buying 6 properties in that neighborhood. And then I look at the property and man, I'm going to have to sink easily just to move in, if I'm lucky, 150 grand into this property before I can move in. That's how bad.
That, you know, even in Ohio, you know, like where I'm at in Ohio, like, you know, we have, I guess we're one of the most affordable across the country when you really think about it, in you know, terms of like Florida and other places like that. But when I was trying to buy this house, like, thank God I was able to get in here, because I was like 2 seconds away from having to get an apartment.
That's how I was.
Because I'm like, my house sold like this. And then I was like, I kept getting beat out by 35, 40 grand on all these properties that weren't, I'm like, well, it's not worth it. Like, oh my God.
Yeah, it isn't. That's the same problem. Yeah. And then you're like, dang, you're like saying, I'm cashed out. You know, we had 50 grand in the bank. We're thinking we're going to spend 25 grand on the closing and everything. And it turns out you show up at closing and like, no, your bank account is not wiped out. And if
you pray that there's like, I hope there's absolutely nothing wrong with my house.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And a lot of the time, you know, dealing with this for a long time in your perspective, do you think that clients sometimes, because they're in that mode that I have to find a place, I don't want to be told sometimes? Do you get a lot of that? Yeah.
I'm sure that happens. I wouldn't necessarily know if that happens, but I'm sure that does. And then I see a lot of people are just frustrated. Like, I totally get it. You know, they're just like probably deal after deal after deal, you know, getting turned down. And finally like, hey, I just need to get in this place. So they waive everything to make it sweet, you know, and unfortunately after the fact, you know, I hope that doesn't come to bite everybody in the, you know, in the rear end about it. But it's sad that that's what it's come to, you know, because I've drastically noticed just a reduction in just home inspections just due to the way this housing market is.
Yeah. So you've seen the, you know, there's everybody's looking to buy and there's very little inventory, because inventories are like non-existent right now here in South Florida. I have clients that tell me that house, you know, it was like 1.2 million or something like that, 1.3 million. He says, Frank, I listed it, and it was gone in an hour. 1 hour. I like this house. The reason I got a hold of this one is because the real estate agent was really good friends with the guy listing it. And he actually told them about it before it went on the market. And I was able to get in on it before it went on the market. I got to see it. And the fact that the owner says, I want this amount flat, I don't care what it appraises at. And they made that deal beforehand. That's the only way I could have bought it, because every other house was 25, 30 grand. Even after we cut the deal and we had the appraisal done, they would come back and says, no, we changed our mind. We want 15 grand over it after the deal was already cut.
Yeah.
I mean, so
That's crazy.
it's desperation that gets people to drop their guard and then say, okay, I'll deal with it. Luckily for me, most of this repair I have to do, my brother-in-law's a roofer. He got the roof done for me, you know, for like $1,000 less. I have to do I still got to do the mold remediation on it, and get it done and things like that. But would it have changed my mind, honestly, if I did find that during an inspection? It wouldn't have. But, you know, I guess sometimes you're like mentally, you know, you're in the middle of all. I mean, I get it. People are so frustrated because of the situation. What do I do? Who do I listen to? You know, do we do it? Do we not do it? And at the end of the day, I was going to do this deal unless there was something drastically wrong with this property. But, you know, $3,000 afterwards was still, it's I worry is when I see the videos of, you know, that whole wall, you know, it's 30, 100 grand because nobody, I mean, the guy dropped the ball. And, you know, people say, well, that's why we have insurance as home inspectors and WDI inspectors. And I said, not if it was neglect, not if you didn't know it in your agreement. And this is where I tell people, you know, the guy with the most paperwork at the end of the day wins.
Yeah, and I agree.
You got to have you can't rush through things. Nope. and not document. Like most of my texts, I mean, honestly, most of my texts could not be WDI inspectors because their attention to that detail isn't going to be there. They can do the great pest control job. They can treat, but their attention to that detail of what the heck is that little spot in that ceiling?
Yeah.
You know, what is that little thing coming through the wall, that little dot? I mean, it's just that attention to detail, where you have to literally you got to be OCD. I mean, OCD people is what we do. We see problems when most people would just overlook them. Yeah. And about being thorough and about make sure you document, because at the end of the day, and what I tell everybody is a lawyer is going to throw you under a bus.
Yeah. So my guy Jeremy that I had brought on, you know, he's been in pest control about 10 years now. And he started with me back in February. He started with Big Terminex, and that's who tried to get me into pest control to begin with. Cause I fell into it all them years ago.
Right.
My job got deleted when I worked at the hospital. It got just removed. There was no longer a job, and I needed just something to pay my bills. So that's how I landed into pest control. But he ended up working for another privately owned company just south of Cleveland. That's probably one of the biggest in our area before he came on with me. But he had been doing all these jobs for years and termite control for years, but he wasn't doing termite inspections. So he did come on, he got licensed with me, but I also had him do one of Paul's classes that I did, one of the advanced termite trainings, you know?
Paul Bello? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a guy, classic example of what goes wrong in our industry.
Well, and exactly. But, you know, like taking that class, and nothing against like, you know, Ohio State or anything else like that for putting those on. Like the classes are great, but like I want my inspectors to, you know, take some of those advanced trainings just because like there's stuff that you're going to miss just by taking that class. It's just what it is.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I'm not talking crap about the state of Ohio or anything else like that.
No.
Like, but it's like, you need more. And taking those classes through Paul, like, you know, I was just able to learn like so much more that I wasn't even aware of.
Yeah, you know I was looking. He was just here at UF, University of Florida, and he was teaching because his, you know, he is an advocate. His clients are not pest control companies that he has to get them in deal with them in litigation. For those of you who don't know who Paul Bello is, I mean, if you don't know, and you're under a rock somewhere, but you know, he's usually having to be on the homeowner side during a litigation, defending the homeowner as an expert witness for them. So he gets to see the absolute worst of what happens in our industry. It's not rampant. It's not to say this is rampant in our industry. It's not. but when it does happen, it's ugly.
Yeah.
And when, you know, you have a termite contract for year after year after year that's been renewed with no treatment, no real inspection, and then all of a sudden a wall, like here in Florida, you don't have this. You have what do you have? Eastern subterranean in your?
Yeah.
You got Eastern sub. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We have now Formosan.
Yeah.
And
I'm so glad we don't got to deal with those like you guys.
bro, in 3 months, that thing will eat up a wall. From the time that you notice something, I tell my client, if you have Formosan, you don't have 3 months to think about it. You need to hire somebody, whether it's going to be in my company later on or somebody else. You don't have 3 months to think about this. It's not a sales pressure. That's just a fact of how fast this thing works. Yeah. And the fact that I will go into a property and they identified it as Eastern sub by an inspector, and I take it back and I look at it under a microscope and I identify and I said, that's not Eastern, that's Formosan. And that wall is already gone. So you know, the fact of that, taking that, the academic training is great. Yeah. Unfortunately, it never replaces a person with, you know, 20 plus years of experience in a field that can tell you what's going to bite you in the butt every time. Because we most of the stuff is information that's great. It's insect biology. We need insect biology. We need to know, you know, the things that the university teaches from an academic level. But, you know, that's not the same as somebody who says, here's your pitfalls where everybody keeps getting it wrong. And having that experience. And I think that if you're a termite guy, you should be, you know, taking something from Paul Bell. I mean, like I said, I wish I would have gone. I didn't know until it was too late. He said he was going to go.
Yeah, I had friends that went down there. I wasn't able to make it just because of my work schedule, but
yeah, I would have made the time to go if I would have known, but I would have had to know months in advance to get it done. But yeah, man, I mean, what's the best advice that you can give a fellow home inspector that doesn't have pest experience? What doesn't have any, he's just a home inspector, and, you know, to help everyone to work together, because there's a lot of guys who, and you know, here's the other, and I'll throw it out there because it's out there. It's not like, sure. It's not an accusation. It's an observation. You know, home inspectors want to charge $350 to $500 for a home inspection, and they're there however long they're there, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. But then when you say, I want a termite inspection, you know, it's $55, $75, $100 for a WDO. There's no way in hell you're going to ever get me to go into a house to do a WDO for $150. I don't care. Because the reality is, because if you do find termite, then you have the chance to sell the service. So you're kind of doing it as a loss leader. And I say, no, my experience of what you're hiring me to do, how long does a termite inspection take? My answer is as long as it takes.
Exactly, yeah.
If it's 2 hours, it's 3 hours. If it's 4 hours, some houses are complicated. Yeah. I'm not going to be in a house for 4 hours because I want to be a salesman.
$55
for $55. You know, that's not, they want it done for that because, yeah, now you're at $1,000 for a home inspection if we charge what we really should charge, but you're entering into a $500,000 transaction, and you're worried about.
Unfortunately, that's just like, that's rampant. You have people that want the cheapest inspector. I've gotten beat out several times because there's a guy that'll do it for $250. Or there's a guy that'll do it for $300. Eric, we come down to $300. Eric, we come down to $250. I'm like, absolutely not. Like, you know, like, and it's not about like the, you know, it's just the time that goes into it. I know what I do, and I know how I work. I know how I inspect, you know, and I know what I'm worth, you know. So there's just no way that I would see myself doing it. Now, when you said less than 150, I do charge, you know, for standalones, for WDI anywhere between like 130 to 150. You know. And it all just depends on the situation as well. But there is a lot of people in my area that are still like the old school ones that are doing $55, $60. And,
Yeah.
and not saying that they're terrible and bad. I don't know. I've never did ride-alongs with them, but I guess, my advice for, inspectors is that I do ride-alongs. I do ride-alongs all the time in my field, with plumbers, with HVAC, with other things, just so I learn and I'm just aware. Not that I am getting licensed in those certain things to be able to comment on those certain things, like I am a plumber or an electrician, but just education in general is just extremely important.
Yeah.
If a home inspector is inspecting houses, he should know about pest control. He should know about different pests. He should know about what he's looking at, whether he can, get licensed and be able to be in a position where he can comment on it. But then just, building relations with other people in his area that specialize in that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Because here in Florida, the Department of Agriculture is real strict on diagnosing and commenting. I mean, it's in our law in Chapter 482. The fact that you can't even, like, if you're a CSR, you can't talk to a client about pest control unless you're taking CEU classes and have an ID in the state, even though you don't perform pest control. So, so every person that answers the phone at my company is going to have to take CEUs, because the guy's going to have, hey, I got this pest problem. He's going to say, I either have to refer you to a technician because I can't talk to you about it legally. So when you're an inspector and you don't have a certificate, a pest control certification, you can't even bring it up.
Yeah.
And that becomes, again, all the legalese that I wish, the homeowner understood, that there's a whole lot of laws. And then you have these gray areas in between, that the answer is, I would recommend you hired a pest control professional. I would recommend, it's like when we do here in Florida, when we do spot treatment for.
Sorry, 1 second here. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I get you.
I don't have an admin hired on yet. I'm in the process of doing that right now. So
I am the admin. I'm looking at my phone because it keeps flashing on me too, but there's nothing I need to answer right now. Mostly it's Facebook stuff that.
Yeah, mine's people trying to schedule, and I'm just sending my automatic my automatic responses here. But
yeah,
I'm in the process of trying to hire an admin, which has been just a journey in itself. So
it's gonna be it's tough, bro, because you're competing with every other company, not even in home inspection, just every other person that's hiring an admin too. And what that's here in Florida. I don't see anybody hiring anybody for less than 18 an hour right now on a competent admin with at least 2 years of experience. It's extremely difficult. This is why I decided I'll stay on as sales and admin right now and just hire techs, because I mostly focus on hiring managers that have management skills, and then I train them as techs, so I don't have to constantly manage everything. And they're doing a lot of the selling right now, and taking a lot of that off my plate so I can do some of this. But yeah, it's tough, bro. It is. And if you don't have a process for hiring, and just the recruiting part is brutal.
Well, it is. Like I said, I had set up some things to where it's just like nobody was showing up for interviews. I'm like, oh my God, I can't give this job away.
You can't. That's
and money wasn't even the issue at certain points. I just couldn't get somebody on. And then some of my friends down in the Columbus area that are in pest control have been just kind of helping me and just kind of giving me some advice and something like that. But it's just been a learning experience. That's for sure.
It is, bro. And then you got, I mean, the best way right now is if you're out in the field, that you're actively
full time.
Actively recruiting. I mean,
I'm in the field full time, working, answering calls, scheduling jobs. I'm in an attic scheduling jobs.
Dude, I just showed my tech. I said, look, you're getting one. You have to handle maybe 3 to 5 calls a day between the customers that are calling you. Hey, when are you going to be here? What are you going to do? What time do you plan? I need to go. And they're handling maybe 5 texts texts a day. I looked at my call volume for the last 2 months. It's somewhere in the neighborhood of 450 calls that I get.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's in addition to all the texts, all the emails, and all the online forms of quote requests.
Yeah.
So when I add all that up, it's somewhere close to about 600 contacts a month. That's 20 a day. And plus I'm in the field too for, 4 hours a day because I'm handling complicated things.
Yeah.
It's tough. It really is
tough.
trying to recruit. But what I would be doing, man, if you walk into somewhere and you see somebody that could possibly be a fit, you're always be closing. Right now, when you're hiring, it's always be recruiting. You have to be in that mindset that everyone is a potential, and interviewing people like on the street, like literally you go to a restaurant and you see somebody like, hey man, would you think about doing some admin work? And do you have it? Because waiters and waitresses, and I mean, you just got to have a training program and a process to put them through, and a whole lot of patience. What I tell people is, I have an enormous amount of patience to train because I have to keep repeating myself. My girlfriend's like, I don't have the patience to repeat myself. I says, that's her biggest problem. She doesn't have the patience to repeat. It says, I have no problem repeating myself if I see that people are advancing and they're moving. And like one of my texts, like, bro, documentation. You didn't document this. And we're just doing pest control. Yeah. And I said, you didn't document this, brother. And here's what's going to happen. That's another phone call I got to handle. If you would have documented that, the customer would have never called. Yeah. You don't have to handle it. I have to handle it. But I guarantee it. Now you're going to hear it from me. And you don't want to. So document. If you would have taken those pictures and shown the client there on the spot, they wouldn't have called. Hey, what happened? Because you were in a hurry, because you were backed up that day. We've just been having a ton of rain. And it's kind of like, dang it.
What we got going on today here.
We got the last 3 days has been raining. So I got to the stop. And as soon as I got there, it was downpouring. I can't do a thing. I decided to go to another part of town where it wasn't raining. I said, that's great. Did you notify the client and say, listen, I'm not going to stop by your house today? The client calls and, hey, I saw that I was on the schedule and nobody showed up. Just simple things like that. Imagine in a WDO, WDI home inspection scenario where you have to document. Bro, I don't know. Is there anything you can add to this conversation that would help people? I think that we haven't covered, because I know we covered a lot.
I know I've seen you. I meant to ask you too, just because I've seen you post a lot about it lately. Is that something you're thinking about adding to your company, service wise?
We're going to add termite.
Okay.
To our business. We're getting the process of getting the licensing. I'm going to be adding. I've been thinking about it for years, and now last year I went to all the classes at UF. So I went to their intermediate, masters, termite, everything. Getting my what is known as an ID for training purpose. I have to get it and train with a company that's going to certify me in it. And then we're looking at the WDO, and then obviously home inspection. We're going to add that to be a complete company. I'd rather do the whole thing. But it was closed down here. Last year I was going to take it with a local company that didn't. They actually have a house set up in a warehouse where they have a whole house set up with everything so that you can train in the facility, except it was closed because of COVID. So
you follow John Bolton?
John Bolton? No, I don't.
Yeah, with the University of Florida down there for home inspector. He owns Inspectigator. I've done a lot of training with him over the years.
Oh, I'm gonna look into that. I had no clue because I was looking. They had one in Doral, like near me, which is about 18 miles from here. And then I was looking also I was thinking about doing it also with Internachi.
Internachi's good. Yeah, I'm a member of Internachi. I have been for many years, and their training is wonderful too. But John Bolton, I think he's out of the Tampa area.
Okay.
So, he's out of the Tampa area and stuff like that. But I've done like a lot of sewer scope training and stuff like that through some of the classes that he offers. Great inspector. He's always there to answer.
We're going to, like I said, we want to be, because originally I wanted to be a GC, a general contractor. And I couldn't stomach it, what had to be done in that industry. so I decided now I'll stick to more of the pest part that was proper, and then I can deal with the inspection part. And that's what I thought about doing, a home inspection, WDO, and then like that. I'm looking at right here. It's big right now for doing smoke testing, because we got a lot of homes you can't find how the rats are getting in, how the roaches are getting in, and a lot of the time I tell people they'll do a scope test, but we've had a lot of contractors do Mickey Mouse work behind walls, and that's never going to find it. If there's a turn somewhere, the only way to find it is a smoke test. And we get a lot of those difficult, like, we've done everything. We've sealed everything in this house. We have no clue how this guy's getting in. And it's usually, we found that later they did a smoke test and it was, so we're looking at that and adding those kind of services onto our company. So termite is going to be the first thing getting that. And then I'm going to look at the home inspection part. Yeah. So
great.
we can control that, that whole vertical integration on what we do. And that way we can just offer a, better quality service to the client. But cool, bro. So you're Eric Snider. It's Unity Property and Pest. What's your phone number and how do they contact you?
My number is 330-957-2178. Our website's unitypropertyandpest.com. They can also reach me by email at eric@unitypropertyandpest.com.
Brother, I hope
Frank, I want to thank you.
No, I appreciate you, brother, for being on.
Yeah.
And hopefully you'll get some home inspections. We're gonna SEO this for you.
Appreciate
so
you.
that you can get some clients out there in your area. And thanks for being on, bro. I really appreciate this.
Absolutely, man. We'll talk soon. Thanks.
All right, brother. Take care of yourself.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.